Welcome everybody to Eco Physiotherapy Presents Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle. My name is Madeline Golick and I am the owner of Eco Physiotherapy as well as a pelvic floor physiotherapist. And my guest today is Cheryl. Welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Thank you very much for having me, Madeline.
I'm very interested in this topic that we're talking about today. But before we let our guests know what that is, I thought maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit about you.
Sure. My name is Cheryl Maloney. I live here in the western part of the GTA with my husband and 2 teenage daughters. My background is actually in business. So I have a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Alberta, as well as my Certified Management Accounting designation. But what got me interested into what I currently do, which is Certified Executor Advisor, is actually it was after a family illness that happened a couple years ago. I'm a co-executor for my parents' will along with my brother. And it was my mom who had a mild stroke about 2 years ago. And it really took us by surprise. She wasn't sick a day in her life. In her early 70s, it was not something we had expected. So it really made me think about, as being an executor, what exactly do I have to do? Because I didn't know. So I found this course, this designation, Certified Executor Advisor, and I took it really for personal knowledge, but then realized there's so many people out there like me who've probably agreed to be an executor for their parents or aunt, uncle, close friend, but they really don't know what that entails.
I absolutely agree. And so I thought this would be the perfect conversation to have because, unfortunately, we all are going to pass on, and somebody's going to have to take care of our things and our finances and our stuff. And there's a lot of responsibility that goes with that, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm sure others have no idea what they're supposed to do. So I thought maybe the best place to start is like, who or what is an executor?
Okay. So yeah, let's go through a few definitions. So an executor is someone who is named in the will, who will be the person to follow through with the instructions that are listed in the will. So you're going to make sure that the wishes of the person in the will are followed through with. So just another example of the testator is the term that we use for the person whose will it is. Okay. So you are in charge of making sure the testator's wishes are followed through.
Right. Okay. So you're the one that's going to, divvy out and, pay off debts and,
absolutely,
dispose of any unwanted items and all of that. Yeah. So let's maybe talk about what are the responsibilities of an executor. Okay. So,
and just to go back to that term executor, a lot of people, traditionally it's thought of as a position of honor, position of trust, which it is. And a lot of people accept it out of moral obligation. So whether it's your parents or your aunt or uncle who asks you, you accept it, not knowing what that entails. So as an executor, the number one thing is you have to follow through on the wishes of the testator. So what's in the will. Your job is to make sure you're the voice for that person who's passed away. So whatever's in their will, you have to make sure that those wishes are followed.
Yeah.
So what that also means is you have to act in the best interests of the beneficiaries in the will, because that's where the proceeds are going. But there's so many more things that happen before you get to the part of divvying out inheritance. Things like when you think of right off the bat, you have to secure the premises. You have to arrange the funeral arrangements or memorial service. You have to do a lot of filings with the government. As we all know, there's lots of forms to fill out.
Right.
I'm trying to think of everything else. So funeral arrangements, as I mentioned, you have to communicate with the beneficiaries. Let them know where you are in each stage of what you're doing. Sell property, if there's property to be sold. File your estate administration tax for the estate, and so on and so on.
That sounds like a lot of stuff that I have no clue where I would even begin with taking these steps. And, there's a timeline, isn't there?
Yeah. And that's the other thing is you don't just dive into giving out inheritance. There are certain things that have to be done, in particular with government filings. So certain forms have to be filed within the first 90 days to actually be the registered as the legal executor. You have to file for a certificate right off the bat. So there's lots of things that have to be done in a certain order. So it's about being prepared. right?
Right.
And I kind of use the analogy of, let's say, baking a cake. If you've never made a carrot cake before,
Yeah.
And someone said, just go do it. Well, if you don't have a recipe to follow and you don't know the order to do it in, it's probably not going to turn out very well. But if you turn and you have this amazing recipe which says, do this first, mix the wet ingredients first, then mix in the dry, and then do this, bake it at this temperature for this long, then you're going to most likely come out with a good cake.
Yeah.
So you need a roadmap.
And
you need a
with your
recipe.
hair intact.
Yeah.
Right? Because, if you're just trying at random to get things done and you're trying to figure out what forms, not only that, but you're also grieving.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing. People, we can talk about it now and have this conversation, but usually the executor is grieving alongside of the beneficiaries because it is either a parent or a close friend or a close relative. So your stress is higher, and when you're grieving, there's a higher risk of making mistakes. So it's all about being prepared for this duty.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's certainly much easier to be able to have these conversations also when the person you're going to be doing the will for is alive, to make sure that you
Absolutely.
Understand also, what they want.
Yeah. And I mean, an example is there's a lot of executors out there that have never seen the will before they actually start in their role as executor. So you don't know, let's say that Johnny's left out of the will and you got to go tell him that. You're not prepared for that. So these are conversations you want to have before your role commences.
That would be a really tough conversation to have, especially when you're not expecting. And then you're the one having to deal with the emotional
Absolutely.
conflict on top of the grieving
Yeah.
emotions and anything else that might be happening at that time as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, you might also have to be there for other family members who are grieving. So that's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
On, perhaps one or two people's shoulder. But then I assume it gets even more complicated if there's more than one executor.
Yes. So absolutely. You're going to have to work in tandem. You're going to have to agree on everything. Yes. So it makes it a little more difficult.
Yeah. So I thought we would talk about, because the one thing that I've learned from you as an executor is that that there's personal risk involved, and I don't think people know that. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about.
And if there's one thing that your viewers take away from today's conversation, and that is to understand that there is unlimited personal liability when you're an executor. So I'm just going to actually read this definition to you, that it is a fiduciary role. And what fiduciary means, and this is the definition, a fiduciary responsibility is a legal obligation of one party to act in the best interests of the other. It is held to a higher standard of conduct and trust. So what that's saying is that as a role of executor, you're expected to do as good as an accountant would do when it comes to finances, as a financial planner would do when it comes to investments, all those things. So you're held to that higher level of conduct. So, and the beneficiaries are watching, right? Because they have
an
vested
interest. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
So, and with the with the internet the way it is now, they can go look up all sorts of things, and they're on top of you to make sure you're doing it properly. So, as an executor, you take on personal liability. It's almost like pledging your own personal assets in doing this duty. So, if you make a mistake, and I mean, no executor is trying to fail.
Yeah,
right.
Well, of course, right.
But maybe they file something late. There's a penalty. Maybe. We'll hit some examples later on how that can happen. But you need to make sure you understand that you do have unlimited personal liability walking in there.
Meaning, if there's any dispute, you're paying out of your own pocket.
Yes. So if there's a dispute with a beneficiary, with a creditor, with others involved in the estate, you are personally liable.
Yeah. We just wanted to kind of make that clear, because that, we're actually, like, I have some personal, close personal experience of people who are going through this right now. And, especially when legal fees start getting involved, like, that gets very expensive. And if, most people just don't carry around extra money to pay for this unexpected, conflict, that you've agreed to, do this for a friend, family member, whatever, not knowing, like, if you haven't seen the will or whatever, you just don't know where the disputes are going to happen. So maybe we could talk about, like, a couple of examples where an executor might run into some issues.
So there's a couple examples. So let's talk about trying to get the job done quickly. So let's say the beneficiaries are really hounding you, I want my inheritance, I want my inheritance. So you pay it out right away.
Yes.
But you haven't received an actual certificate from the government saying that your assessment is complete. So what that can mean is maybe they'll come back and assess the estate again and say, you know what, we need another extra $10,000 in estate taxes. You've already given away all the estate money to the beneficiaries. You are on the line for that additional tax.
Wow.
And I mean, I can only imagine going back to the beneficiaries, they're not going to be giving it back to you.
Right.
But that's because you gave the money away too soon.
Okay, so you want to make sure all the assessments, all the filings, you've spoken and made sure there are no outstanding creditors or
That's
any.
right.
You want to make sure all of that's in place
All of that's clear.
before you take it out, because again,
Yeah.
like you said, you're personally liable.
Yeah, so there's something called a clearing certificate, which would then, if they came back and assessed you after you have received the clearing certificate, you're not on the line for that additional. So yeah, there are certain order of things to do.
And you want to make sure that you've done them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another one would be, now this is an actual example that's happened, where there was a residence, so it was a family friend who was the executor. It was his friend that passed away, and he was taking care of the estate, and of course the friend's children were the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
So he went and got a real estate agent, sold the house properly, which was fine, but the beneficiaries were smart enough to go look up the zoning of that house. It was a residential property, but it was actually zoned as residential or commercial. So he sold it as a residential property. If they would have sold it as a commercial property, they would have got $200,000 more. So the beneficiaries sued the executor for an extra $200,000 that they didn't receive.
Right.
And this is a family friend. He says, I was just trying to do what I'm supposed to do as an executor.
Yeah.
And that happened.
And unfortunately, personally,
He's on the line.
Personally liable. Yeah. And
that's a lot.
I don't know about you. I don't have $200,000 just
not
hanging
kicking around. No.
Yeah.
No. And another example, so that's a monetary example. Another example is where there were 3 sisters. Their mother passed away. The mother said to the eldest sister, who she appointed as executor, I've gone around the house and I've put stickies on the back of everything color-coded. So you get green, your middle sister gets blue, and the youngest sister gets pink.
Yes.
So whatever has that on. Now, what she didn't do is, of course, all the sisters had a key to the mom's house.
Yeah.
As an executor, you should secure the premises. Even though they were her sisters, she didn't think that anything could go wrong. Well, the younger sister goes in first, takes everything she wants. And when the middle sister goes in, she phones the executor sister and says, where's everything with the blue sticker? She says, well, it's in the house. There's nothing here. The younger sister went out and cleaned out the entire house. So now the middle sister is suing her older sister for the silver tea set that was promised to her by mom. And I mean, yes, a tea set can be worth a lot of money, but it's the sentimental value too, right?
Yeah.
So it can be for something as small as a tea set or as large as the sale of a property.
Right. And then, there's, the lifetime animosity.
Absolutely.
That, now you have this family conflict between sisters who, who knows if they're going to be able to work past that in the future, right? Yeah. Now it's all 3 over, not, maybe it should have been listed out properly in the will.
Right.
Who gets what rather than a sticky note. But you just don't think about those things.
Yeah.
Right? In advance.
You don't. And then that's the thing is if you can really prepare ahead of time, you're going to alleviate most of those issues so that you will be able to move forward amicably.
Yeah.
But if you don't, the person who really could solve those problems is the one that's passed away.
Right.
They can't give any explanation. They can't sit there and say, this is how these are my wishes. It is really spoken through the executor.
Okay, so let's talk about how do we try to mitigate? Like, how do we try to reduce these risks? Mm-hmm. What can people be doing now if they're listed as an executor to protect themselves?
I'd say the number one thing is communication, right? As in everything. So if you're an executor, the best thing you can do is speak with the testator ahead of time. Go through the will with them so you understand what their wishes are. And if there's any red flags that come up, you can address them then. Right? So it's communication. Other things, plan ahead of time. Sit down. Well, that's what CAs do. We sit down with people and we go through and we provide them with a roadmap. We can say, this is what's going to happen in the beginning, within the first 3 months, and within the year. So it's about letting them know what they're going to expect, because as we know, their role never commences at a perfect time in life. Death happens when death happens, right?
Yes.
It's not going to fit in your schedule, but you're going to have to deal with it. The government's not going to say, oh, I'm so sorry that you're busy right now. And let's say you're an accountant and it's tax season. The government doesn't care. You have to get things done in a certain time period. Right.
And so can you maybe expand a little bit more in terms of what a certified executor advisor does?
The first thing is I create a dialogue between the executor and the testator. So we'll get together, the three of us, we'll talk about what's in the will, we'll talk about the expectations, but I'm also that unbiased third party that can ask the difficult questions. So let's say you're the executor for your parents. There may be some questions that you feel awkward asking. What's the size of your estate? How much do you have in RSPs?
What's your debt?
What are you leaving? What is your debt? Who are you leaving to what? And those are the things I can ask, and I get that out on the table for you. Right. So that's one thing. The second thing is you need to know as an executor what your risk is. And there's certain estates that are way riskier than others. So things that would come into play. Let's say somebody's left out of the will. Or let's say there's blended families. So you might have step siblings and half siblings and divorces and things like that. So that makes things more tricky. Right?
Yes.
And there could be, let's say that one sibling has borrowed lots of money from the parents over the years. And is that put in the will? Is there a loan outstanding? Is that documented? So all those things have to come up, right, in conversation. So we do a risk assessment and find out where you're at to see, what you're going to come up against.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other things that I would do to help is I do walk you through what's going to happen. So in the first 48 hours, what do you need to do? Things like if there's pets, they need to be taken care of, right? We don't think about that.
Right. I'm literally, my eyes are just right. What if there's other people?
What if there's scruffy in the house and people aren't thinking about that, right? There could be animals.
Yeah.
Another thing, an example, I sat down with my sister-in-law and they have a farm. I said, if something happened to you and your husband, what happens to the horses and the dogs and the chickens do you have a contingency plan in place? And she just looked at me and went, I never thought about that. Right. You don't, because you don't think you're both going to be gone at the same time, but things can happen. It could be a car accident.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You need to secure the premises. So from intruders and also natural elements. What if a window was left open? Did you know that?
What if the stove was left on?
Absolutely. You don't know. So we walk through what you do in the first 24 hours, 48 hours, first 90 days. And the 90 days really deals a lot with what kind of government filings do you have to do.
Yeah.
Right? And then, of course, communication with the beneficiaries. You let them know where you're at. Lots of different things. And then usually the average time for an estate to close is between 12 months and 24 months. So I can walk you through what's going to happen. Every estate's different, but you're going to follow the same procedure.
Same procedure, yeah. But obviously, the more things there are, if there's multiple properties in different countries.
Absolutely.
Trying to figure out how you sell those things.
And even something as simple as your final wishes. So let's say that you're the executor for your uncle. Yeah. Just as an example. You want to ask him, what do you want to do? Do you want a service? Do you want to be cremated? What do you want? Because all of a sudden when he passes away, you're grieving as well. And then all of a sudden you've got all these different opinions coming at you. Well, he would have liked this. No, I think we should do this. You're the voice of him. Yeah. So it's best to find out ahead of time what he wants. And you can say, no, Uncle Joe said, this is what I want. Yeah. So it'd probably even be better if it was written down. Absolutely. So, and attached with the will. So here's part of your plan. Okay, what do you want for this? And then you're going to know that here's the documentation I'm going to have to be doing. I walk you through all of that. Yeah. So you have a baseline for what you're going to go through, and you're going to know that in what order things need to be done.
Absolutely. And I think that's, you know, it's just not something that we talk about because we don't really talk about death and,
No.
you know, like it's not a fun conversation
It's one that's avoided, yes.
But man, like to be able to mitigate the risk and reduce the amount of stress and just know what you need to do without having, you know, a panic attack.
Yeah. And it
right?
is time consuming. And so the executor has to realize when they take that on, it will be time consuming. But they also have to understand that you can be compensated for that role. An average would be about 2.5 to 3% of the estate is something you could charge. But that's something you want to clarify before.
Ahead of time.
Ahead of
Okay,
time.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and some siblings, you know, are happy if you're, for example, the power of attorney and you're taking care of mom and you're doing this. But the moment you become the executor, then they might ask, well, where did you spend that money and what did you spend it on and where's it gone? Because all of a sudden they realize that that's coming out of their inheritance. So you kind of get all these things handled ahead of time. This is what I can help you with. And there's ways of doing that inside the estate, but also outside the estate, so it's more discreet.
Yeah. Cheryl, this has been super informative, and I certainly hope that our viewers have a little bit of more information to understand. And of course, we will be posting Cheryl's contact information at the end of the video or in the description if you're watching on YouTube to get in contact. You know, these are hard conversations to have, but really important to have them ahead of time, especially if you've already agreed to be an executor and especially if that person's still alive. A lot of this could be hashed out in the beginning so that, you know, when the unfortunate event happens, you know, you're at least that part of the stress is minimized.
And that's the main thing I'd like to leave people with is to remember that when that person passes away, you can't get a question answered from them. Once they're gone, there's no way they can answer that question. So let's chat beforehand. Let's get everything ironed out, and that way it's going to be a lot easier for you. And that way it makes the role truly an honor and not an overbearing stress.
Exactly. So thank you again so much for coming on the show and sharing this information because I think it's really, really useful. And hopefully our viewers found the same. So thank you
for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.